Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this session, The Journey to Build Relationships for Data Sharing Agreements. My name is Tracy. I am a member of the Office of Indian Education Technical Assistance team, and I'm happy to be your facilitator today. Thank you for joining us for today's session. Before we begin, we will start as we always do with our standard disclaimer.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education Contract Number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
All right, well, now that we've got out of the way, I'm really excited to have with me today several panelists who are going to share their journey to develop data sharing agreements with their projects and their partners. And we have a few objectives of what we hope that you will get out of this session. But before I dive into that, I do want to point out just a couple of features that if you were in our opening keynote, you were able to hear a little bit about those, but I'll just point these out just for the sake of interaction. So to your right, you're seeing us on the screen, but to your right, you should see in the Pathable platform several tabs. There's one labeled chat, and we definitely want and encourage you to type in your hellos, to say hello to us over there. Let us know where you're joining us from today. And also any comments or questions. Tell us what you hope to learn from the panelists today. We want to hear from you. We're going to give our panelists opportunities to share their stories and experiences and insights. And then we'll save some time at the end to answer all your questions. But please feel free to use the chat along the way so that you can type those in, and we'll be sure to address your questions. Next to the chat tab, you probably also see polls, files, and people. So in a minute, we will say we have a poll, and we'll lift that up for you momentarily. And when I refer to it, you're just going to click on that little tab there, and then you'll have an opportunity to respond. We also have in the Files tab a number of different resources that you may find helpful when it comes to developing data sharing agreements or memorandums of understanding. I'll say a little more about those at the end, but for now, know that those are available for download at any time in that tabs file. You can also find them after today up in the resource library. So above, where you see our screen and the chat tabs and the files tab, you see that resource library. There you can download materials from any of our sessions, and you can come back to that resource library at any time before, during, or after the sessions to review those resources. All right, and I see some people saying hello in the chat. Nice, thank you for joining us from snowy Alaska, all the way down to Oklahoma. So glad to have you with us here today. So on the screen right now, you see our objectives for this session. We've brought together some panelists and some representatives from some community organizations. We hope that you'll learn from their experiences and journeys to develop data sharing agreements with diverse stakeholders. We hope that you'll gain some insights from their experiences about some of those challenges that they faced, solutions that they deployed or worked towards, and lessons learned during that journey as well. And also hopefully acquire some resources and strategies to support your work to develop data sharing agreements. And I see we've got some more folks chiming in and saying hello. We've got Montana represented, more folks from Alaska and Massachusetts. Glad you're here today. All right, so data sharing agreements, memorandums of understanding, these are perennial hot topics for us and really a shared concern across various cohorts of OIE grantees. Some of our discretionary programs have requirements in the grant, the grant has requirements for data sharing agreements with local education agencies. If you're an ARP-AIR grantee, you know that there's a specific grant requirement around data sharing agreements. Other grantees, such as our NAL grantees or Native American language grantees, report on certain GEPRA measures related, in the case of our NAL grantees, it's related to average daily attendance, right? So that's data that may come from a school district, or if you're a school, the grantee is a school, maybe you have access to that data, but if not, that's probably something that you had to enter into some kind of agreement with, or maybe you're negotiating an agreement currently with the LEAs that you serve. Of course, there can always be unique grant requirements. So depending on what you proposed and what you were given the OIE funds to do, you may actually have particular activities that are unique to your program, like monitoring student grades or assessment scores to identify students who need support. But chances are there may be have some reason or circumstance to require approaching a local school district about accessing student data, which may be regarded as protected and private, which hence the need for formal agreements. So let's take a look at that poll now. If you want to just click on that tab next to the chat where it says polls, our producer is going to lift up that question. Where are you on the journey to negotiating data sharing agreements? And this is not a gotcha moment. We really, there's no penalties to answering correct or incorrect. We really just want to get a sense from our audience members. Where are you? Maybe you haven't started. That's okay. That's good for us to know. Maybe you've reached out to your partners, but they're not so willing to engage. Again, that might be helpful for a panelist to know. They may have had similar experiences. Take a minute now and see where you are, and then we'll get a chance to look at your responses. Okay, I'm looking, once you submit your response, you're able to see a bar graph. So if you're looking at that right now, it looks like, let's see, most responses say that we have about a third of respondents right now so far say we have assigned agreements, but we're having some challenges with implementing it. I bet that rings a bell for many of our panelists. We have about an equal number who say that we've started conversations with our partners, but we don't have the agreement yet. Okay. So you're running into some challenges maybe. Feel free to chime in the chat box. I wish we could unmute everybody to have conversations, but unfortunately that's not how our webinars are set up. So please use the chat box to let us know what are some of those challenges that you're facing, or maybe what have you tried to move past or work through some of those challenges. About 20% of respondents. That's awesome. About 20%. Oh, just a few. Remember, somebody else responded, so it went down the number. 17% of our respondents so far say they have a signed agreement and everything's going smooth. I love that. That's great. Tell us in the chat what's working for you. What helped that? What do you think contributed to that success? Your words might be helpful to some of your fellow grantees. All right. Yep, and then we have about 10% there who says, we know we need one, we're not sure where to begin. Thank you for your honesty, I appreciate that. I think there will be something for everybody in our sharing today. I'm seeing more hellos from Albuquerque, Washington, DC, Washington State. This is amazing. All right, keep those comments coming. We're gonna continue to monitor the chat box, ask questions, make comments, and we will get to introducing our panelists here in just a moment. But first, I just want to talk just a few minutes about this major influence that informs how we approach these conversations around data sharing agreements. We really can't talk about data sharing without acknowledging FERPA, or the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, right? The federal law that protects the privacy of student education records and really applies to all schools that receive funds under the Department of Education. So generally, schools must have written permission from a parent or an eligible student in order to release information about a student's educational record. But FERPA does allow schools to disclose some of those records without consent or under some very specific circumstances, some of which you see there on the screen. Now, we do have a past webinar where we dive into this much more deeply, and we sort of unpack some of those circumstances. You can find that resource also in the Files tab. There's a link there to one of our past webinars around data sharing agreements, where we do talk a little bit more in depth about FERPA. For now, I want to play just a short video for us so that we can kind of ground ourselves in this understanding. And I know a lot of you know this already, but this is a nice short little video that emphasizes some of those specific points that are likely to be front of mind when we're having conversations with partners or LEAs or districts about data sharing. So we'll take a few minutes to play that now.
The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, is a federal law which applies to educational institutions and agencies such as schools, school districts, colleges, and universities to which funds have been available under any program administered by the Secretary of Education. The purpose of FERPA is to protect the privacy of parents and students with regard to education records under Section 444 of the General Education Provisions Act as amended. Wow, it's easy to get confused with all that legal language. Let's try that again in plain English. The truth is, data about us is everywhere. It's collected when we shop, take a vacation, look at a web page, or send an email. You see, FERPA is a federal law that applies to most schools, colleges, and universities. It's meant to protect all that identifiable information about students in records that are kept by schools, and it provides the right for you to access that information, to seek to correct it, and generally to consent to its disclosure. Let's take a closer look at what that means. Today is Patrick's first day of kindergarten. As Patrick moves through the education system, his schools accumulate data, such as his grades, learning disabilities, or special needs information, and disciplinary information. As Patrick takes tests to see how he's progressing, his scores are protected by FERPA. FERPA requires schools and state and local educational agencies to keep the information that came from Patrick's records private and get his parents' written consent before sharing it with anyone else. There are some exceptions, but the general rule is Patrick's records are confidential. Students don't attend school anonymously, so schools routinely share some basic information about students called directory information. If a school is going to share directory information, it must notify parents and students who are 18 or over or who attend post-secondary institutions. For example, Patrick's school yearbook contains his name, grade level, and photograph. That's okay because his school designated these items as directory information and published its policy on its website, and Patrick's parents haven't opted out. FERPA also requires schools provide Patrick's parents the ability to review his records to make sure they are accurate. Patrick's applying to college. He and his parents review his high school transcript and discover the school has gotten Patrick confused with another student who has lower grades. This isn't good. FERPA not only gives his parents the right to see the records, but also to request that the school correct mistakes. If Patrick's parents and the school disagree on the accuracy of the info, FERPA gives Patrick's parents the right to request a hearing. Colleges and universities are also required to protect student information under FERPA, but the rules change a bit. Meet Lisa, a high school graduate who is headed off to college. Hooray! While Lisa was in elementary, middle, and high school and under the age of 18, FERPA allowed her parents access to her education records. Now, Lisa is entering college, and her FERPA rights transfer from her parents to her. Her parents wonder, but wait a minute, I'm paying the bills here, and now I can't see how she's doing academically? Since Lisa's parents claim her as a dependent on their federal tax return, her parents can still see her education records if Lisa's college chooses to release them. FERPA doesn't require schools to release records, it only allows this. You may be wondering, how do I find out more about how FERPA affects me or my child? To start, look for your school or school district's FERPA policy on its website, or ask your principal or school administrative staff about your rights under FERPA. Visit the Department of Education's Family Policy Compliance Office website for answers to frequently asked questions on privacy, training, and guidance for parents and students on FERPA rights and protections.
All right, just a little intro overview about FERPA. You know, it's not about data sharing per se. It is about protecting student information and it lays out the specific circumstances under which data can be shared. So as you saw in the short video, you know, schools and districts are compelled to protect student data privacy. So working through some of that guidance, addressing concerns related to the data privacy are definitely key to addressing those issues and concerns when you're starting out on this journey. And it sounds like some of you have embarked on this journey and maybe have had some successes that you can share along in the chat box. So without a further ado, I would love to now introduce our panelists for today. I am so pleased to have both representatives of the grantees, the work that we do, as well as some community organizations who are joining us today. First, I'd like to introduce Yvette McGeesick. She is a fellow grantee and project director. She's joining us from the Saucahgan Chippewa community, specifically the Mole Lake community. The Mole Lake Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, in Wisconsin, where she serves as Director of Education for the tribe and Project Director for the ACE program. Yvette is joined by the Superintendent of the Crandon School District, who is a key partner in the OIE grant work with whom Saucahgan and Chippewa community has a data sharing agreement. So welcome, Yvette and Superintendent Palabicki. So I'm also pleased to introduce another grantee, Chris Meyer. Chris Meyer is the Education Director for the Coeur d'Alene Tribe in Idaho and also serves as Project Director for the NYCP grant. Glad to have you here today, Chris. And then we're also love to welcome Emily Calderon Galdiano. She is from the UP Partnership in San Antonio, Texas. As the UP Partnership's Vice President for Data and Post-Secondary Success, she helps partners make data-informed decisions to affect systems of change. And thank you, Emily, for joining our panel today. So I'm going to give each of our honored guests an opportunity to share their stories, and then we'll have some time for Q&A, but I want to make sure that they all get an opportunity to share their experiences with you. So please make liberal use of that chat box as we go along. I see some of you are starting to type in some questions and comments here, so keep those coming as they occur to you. And then in the meantime, I'm going to hand the baton to Yvette and Superintendent Palabicki, who joining us from Mole Lake, Wisconsin. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
So Larry, I'll just say something real quick because whatever I have, I'm sure the questions, you'll be able to answer them. So I'll get the questions going. And again, I'm Yvette McGeesick. I'm the Education Director for the Saucahgan Chippewa Tribe, and I'm also the Project Director for the ACE. And although I've been here for 5 years, I still feel pretty new at everything in the education department. When I first started here, we were a little behind electronically, and so I had to update the department itself. And one of those things were to develop a database for our students where we are able to monitor our students from K through 12, for K through 12 and beyond. And for us to be successful with that tracking, we rely heavily on our local school district, the school district of Crandon. And so I went to the school district and met with the then supervisor and along with the Forest County Potawatomi tribe, which is north of the school. I was able to speak with him, and the door was open. He was very welcoming, and we created an MOU with policies and procedures at that time. And since then, we of course have the new superintendent, Larry Polovicki, and I was able to meet with him many times throughout these past few months. And I'm always very glad and happy that his door is open, he's open, and he's been very helpful. So Larry, if you want to go ahead and explain, I think you wanted to do some history for us a little bit about our relationships.
So Yvette and I are both locals, and I'm not new to the area at all. I'm just third year in my position as superintendent. Prior to that, I was the special education director in Crandon for 5 years, and then I spent 3 years in Leona, which is a neighboring community, as their special ed director, principal, and superintendent. And over my time, 20 some years in education, all of it in Crandon or Leona, which also happens to encapsulate both the Secaucus Chippewa community and the Forest County Potawatomi community. We've historically have had an interesting partnership. In the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of issues between both tribes and the school. And over I would say the past 20 years, Yvette, for sure, we've started working more closely on what each entity can do to support each other. And in the past, as my role as special ed director in Crandon, we had developed some MOUs between both tribes to share information about the fact that our district was disproportionate in the number of Native American students being referred for special education. What come out of that was that we partnered with the Disproportionality Technical Assistance Network, went to trainings, and that is where we really started to come together as what I'll call a group of three. So between SCC, FCP, and the school district of Crandon, we started looking at more in depth about what the root cause, what the root issues were, and more from a grassroots level of what we could do to support each other and as tribal entities and as a school district. So in 2019, what was developed was basically an MOU between the Forest County Potawatomi and Secaucus Chippewa community, and we developed policies and procedures for the school district of Crandon and those two tribal entities. With the basic intent of that being that all American Indian children of school age would have equal access to all of the programs that we offered, all of the services and activities offered within the school district. So how do we do that? Good question. Like Yvette said, there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of consultation. I've met frequently with Yvette. I meet monthly with the Forest County Potawatomi Executive Council, and working with Secaucus Chippewa to start those meetings again with their tribal council as well. But we work with the tribal officials, the education departments, and the parents of American Indian children in the planning of our policies and procedures. And we review those annually, typically at our Title VI Indian education meetings that we host, where people are able to take a look at what we have in place and make recommendations based on what is working, what isn't, areas to change, what we can do better from both the tribal aspect and also the school district. So we basically follow, I think there's, 5 policies, 6 policies and 6 procedures. And if you want to know more about that, I can speak to any questions that you may have, but the basic of it, the basics is that, we share a lot of information. We communicate frequently so that there aren't the questions and the concerns that come up when 2 groups of people or 3 groups of people that are working together don't share that information. And I feel as though between the tribal communities and the school district, we've strengthened our partnership, and we've made some progress in areas that in the past we weren't able to make progress in, and break down some walls and barriers which impede educational access for all students. Does anyone have any questions related to that? I can, I guess one of the biggest pieces of our IPP, what we call it, or MOU, it's the same, is that the encouragement from tribes and the school to get our American Indian students into all different sorts of curricular subjects, including academic and co-curricular, to electives, but to give them an opportunity to have the experience, an equitable experience on par with non-Indian students. Yvette?
Yeah, I'll just add that I was extremely happy with when we received the ACE grant. It allowed us to kind of pitch in a little more on our end also, and we were able to put 2 tutors in class directly at the school in classes. And I believe that because of the relationship that we already have with Crandon, that was easily done. Wasn't a lot of hoops to jump through. It was, and from what I understand, they've been very helpful. They got quite a bit of students back on track, especially after being so behind during the pandemic. And it's really good to see that we're able to do these more hands-on. And of course, we're able to provide a driver now, which will allow the students to stay after who would need the extra help, and they have their ride home afterwards. And so that that also is very helpful. And the fact that the ACE grant allows us to change as we go along. We're starting to see that those tutors are way more needed and important than we had thought. So that is definitely something that I'll be working on my end to make sure that we can provide more people, more Native faces, I guess, up at the school, to be there to help our students and to just have a presence to help them. And it's, like I said before, I'm just very happy and glad, and that we have this open conversation with the superintendent and I look forward to more years and for the next few years to get even better.
You know, I think one of the, she talked about how the tribe was able to secure some funding for some additional tutors in our building. And I thought one of the best parts about that, and it's not egotistical at all, is the fact that she asked me to be part of the interview process for those tutors. And I felt like that was a really good way to bridge the gap, because together we got to interview the applicants, learn about them, and then, you know, as a group, we made the decisions on who we were going to hire. And that just spoke volumes about the fact that, you know, that's what an MOU is about. It's about building that partnership, coming to terms on some difficult conversations at times, but ultimately knowing that the MOU, maybe in the past, it was developed out of frustration or anger or, you know, mistrust. But I think that alone shows that we have really worked hard to build common ground, trust, relationship, one in which we do share information. And the fact that I was allowed to be part of that interview process just made the transition for everybody that much easier. So I was really appreciative of that from a school standpoint.
Thank you both for sharing. I'm sure we'll come back to you after our other panelists share. So do I understand, is your data sharing agreement relatively new? The impetus was the ACE grant?
No,
Oh.
we've been sharing data with the tribes for years.
That's right.
The most recent MOU that we have in place was from 2019. And annually, Tracy, we do look at that. And this year, because we were able to meet in person again, finally, we had representation from both tribal entities and the school district of Crandon at our annual Indian education meeting, where everybody that attended was given a copy of the MOU, and now are able to take that back, digest it, and make recommendations on how to make it better. So we're looking forward to that process too, seeing what the opinions are and where we can improve as a district and what both tribes can do to help us reach our goals. So.
Very nice. Well, it sounds like the relationship and the ongoing communications and trust building really supported your work in this area to have those, like you said, difficult conversations and work through those challenges. Well, thank you for giving us initial insight into your experience. Next up, I'd like to hand the baton to Chris Meyer, joining us from the Coeur d'Alene tribe in Idaho. She has also been engaged in these conversations and developing agreements with her partners for a good number of years. So Chris, what would you like to add now related to your experiences?
Thank you, Tracy, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Chris Meyer. I'm a Coeur d'Alene tribal member, and I'm the Director of Education. I'm responsible for birth through graduate degrees. Our data sharing journey began actually in 2007, so we've been at this for a while. It was in 2007, the department created an education pipeline. The pipeline includes 15 bullets or segments, birth through graduate school, and each of the segments include the number of students in that academic year, their gender, and their ethnicity. The pipeline also includes all of our private, our tribal, federal, and state partners and programs supporting each level. And we're grateful for the the Office of Indian Education, it is funding our ability to be able to support middle and high school students. To ensure our students are moving from one segment of the pipeline to the next, it became clear that data was essential. So today I'm only going to share the process that we went through for our middle and high school students to participate in our NYCP and our ARP programs. To prepare our students to enter college and career, success in their core foundational courses is very important. We knew that we were going to need to access their grades. And so the department team created a waiver that would provide us access to their academic performance. And our waiver is between our families and the Department of Education. And that waiver was created by the team, but it also was visited by the school district's attorney and our tribal attorney. And once it was approved by them, it went to the school board for their approval, and they did approve it. So we've been operating under that document for some length of time. The agreement allows us to look at not only their academic, but their attendance. We don't have access to their behavior data. So each fall, this waiver is included in the school application. And it's up to the parents to decide whether they want to have their students engage in the tribal programs. And I'm speaking specifically the NYCP and the ARP projects that we're able to offer. This process wasn't easy. The superintendent and I had some very difficult conversations. It wasn't over the agreement. It was just our developing a relationship. They have not had a relationship with the Department of Education in the past. And it took some time and some really difficult conversations between us to reach a point where we had a strong relationship. And we've had conversations since, and we realized that both of us, it wasn't about us, it was about our students. And so we kept coming back. We never let our frustration or our last conversation get in our way of continuing that communication. The challenges that we've had to work through, as I shared, we have been collecting data for a few years. In the early years, we wrestled with how to organize the data, and we struggled with the analysis. The team came up with the tiering system. There's 3 tiers. Tier 1, students are passing their core courses. Tier 2, students are doing okay, but we keep our eyes on them. Tier 3, students aren't faring well in their core courses, meaning a high number are failing 1 or more core courses in a trimester. When we presented the data to the administrative team each semester, it was really frustrating to us not to have open and honest conversations on what we were seeing and working together to come up with some solutions. Yeah, it was really difficult for us to see that they weren't perceiving the level of concern that we were seeing in how our students were doing. But we realized that the relationship was important to us and that we needed to keep making adjustments to make it work. And to remember that the grades are only one part of the story. The successes and persistence, what contributed to this? It was our love and our concern for our students, is why we did and continue to persist in supporting our students. Whenever there's a barrier or a roadblock, we are determined to find ways around it. Knowing how our students are doing academically is important to us, to our department team, to our families, and of course, to our tribe. What we're learning in these past few years is the inequity that's occurring in our schools, and how do we rectify that? So we're having some conversations with other programs, other departments in designing a CAST team that will help us. Yes, we have a clear understanding of how our students are doing academically, but we don't know the backstory. It's easy to blame the school, but that's not what we want to be doing. We want to understand, are there mental health issues? Are there behavioral concerns that the tribe needs to address as well? So we're hoping that CAST project will be funded so that we can take a deeper look at why our students are not faring well in our. So I think what this journey has taught us is that we have a clearer picture of how our students are doing, and it has given us a clearer understanding to dig deeper at what's going on with our student and what do we need to do as a tribal community to address those, what we believe are generational issues behind that academic lack of academic success. The advice, establish an agreement with the LEA is really the beginning. Once you begin collecting the data, it is vitally important to analyze and remember grades are only one part of the story. There's more going on with our students than meets the eye.
Great points.
Mhm.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
So I see some more questions coming in the chat box. Please keep those coming along. We'll get to those. And first, I would like to hand the speaker baton now to Ms. Emily Calderon-Galdiano. And she works in a slightly different context than our grantees, but works with a large number of districts and serves a large number of students. And so, Emily, I'm sure these conversations are familiar to you. Tell us a little bit about your work and the data that you work with and share with your districts.
Sure, thank you, Tracy. So here at Up Partnership, we're a regional backbone located in San Antonio, in Central Texas. Being a regional backbone, that means we work with our K-12 partners, higher education institutions, corporate partners, and then of course, community-based organizations. And I believe in the slide, Tracy, that you have.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
In there is that we work with, so it says here, we have 17 school districts in San Antonio alone. And the number of students that are enrolled somehow that are ages 5 to 24 here in Bexar County are about 400,000 students. And so we've got, if we include our early childhood children, right, we're come up to about 570. So with that, with these 17 school districts, right now, the specific MOUs that I'll be addressing here are with them, and we have 8 with the largest school districts. So typically, this is going to be of the 570, I'm sorry, I said 700 total, 0 to 24, 570 young people, 570,000 ages 5 to 24. With our MOUs, we serve 400,000 through our networks, through our collaboratives, through our partnerships, et cetera. One of the biggest things, I have to say ditto to what the previous speakers shared, relationships are the work. Relationships are the work right there. I mean, so the MOU is just the beginning. And then from there on, it means that we have to continue to work together as we are partnering to ensure that our young people are at the center. So here at UP, we're working with about 175 various partners, again, as a backbone, that are committed to utilizing data and aligning resources to create equitable systems and ensuring that all young people in Bexar County are future ready. And when we talk about future ready, the biggest thing is we're saying that, you know, it has to be centered around this area of equity. And so if our young people are future ready, we're defining it that their voices are heard, that they shape and the policies that are in place and decisions that impact them, that they have the healing supports and protections that they need, and that they have access to education and career opportunities. So our three big equity pillars here with our work for a student being future ready are healing, access, and voice. And so HAV are the must-haves with equity, right? And so ensuring that that's how we're moving forward. And this is something that we've had our partners, again, K-12, higher ed, corporate, community-based organizations are all working around that. And one of the biggest things that we do is, of course, being data-driven decision-making, because the idea is that data should not just be used to improve conditions, but to improve conditions and not just measure them. Right? So with all of our work, it's important that we disaggregate our data by race and ethnicity, by gender, socioeconomic status, whenever possible. We also try to see any kind of intersections of the data, because the experiences of a young person in South San Antonio may be very different from those of a student in the west part of the community. San Antonio is a very, redlining was impacted our community quite a bit, and we are still seeing the effects of that to date. And so it's important that we are able to see the intersections of all of this. So our data sharing MOUs that we have with our ISDs, include detailed descriptions of the work that we're doing and the work we're doing with our different collective impact networks and strategic initiatives. Part of the stuff that we do is we have 4 main networks here that we house, and it's important that our MOUs that we have with our school districts include information that will help inform, again, the decisions that get made within each of those different networks. Because as a backbone organization, we don't do the work ourselves. We are the facilitator. We bring people together, and we are the ones that are able to then get folks, facilitate conversations. Maybe large districts don't talk with some of the smaller districts, and that's where we're able to be that intermediary. And again, have folks be able to partner together with this. And so some of the examples of the data that we collect are going to be, some is going to be more rapid cycle, like monthly data that we get around attendance and discipline, because that will help inform what's going on with our restorative practices collaborative. We also get monthly college application and FAFSA information, because that informs our equitable enrollment collaborative, ensuring that our students are going and enrolling into college. Others include our annual data that we pool. That includes elements such as demographics of our campuses and of our students, but then also standardized tests, course enrollment, how our students are doing when we talk about, again, attendance and discipline. For example, with COVID, we knew that 2020 was an asterisk year, right? And so if folks were trying to figure out how can we use that information, that how are our students doing in this new hybrid environment, or this new virtual environment. And parts of it is everything that we do. All of our MOUs are going to be reviewed annually. However, one of the big lessons that we learned is that our MOUs are actually signed for a 3-year term, because sometimes there is turnover, and because to get the bureaucracy of getting maybe our school boards to sign off on our different MOUs, that let's do a 3-year term, but we review them annually with the leadership at the school district, and then through a data support council. So we have a data support council that we also convene here at UP, that includes folks from each of the different places where we have these MOUs. So it's also, again, a space for school district folks to talk with higher ed folks, to talk with community-based organization folks. And so with this, we've also kind of helped to see like, all right, where can we partner together? Because, for example, just because we have this many school districts doesn't mean that they are all the same. We have some school districts that can have 15 people in their data team. That's amazing. The majority of my school districts have one person that has to handle all the data requests that go to the Texas Education Agency, that handles all the requests that the superintendent's asking for, that's handling all the requests that Up Partnership asks for. So all of that. And so if that's the reality, how can we make sure to kind of streamline those processes to see so that they can learn from each other, so that they can, one district A can say, this is something that we're struggling with, and then the other districts can tell us, oh, okay, us too, and then how can we then have some of the larger school districts, again, partner with them. Here's how they've developed certain things and how they're able to kind of streamline their process. One of the big things is that when we're working on this, we always make sure that everything is around FERPA, right? So we make sure, and so with our school districts, they've found that any of the requests that we do, there's legitimate educational need and interest within educational records. And so as we are continuing to partner with folks, and as we're having the conversations with additional people that we would like to continue to share data with, these are some of the things that we follow. So for example, one of the big questions is we always have to be ready of why do we want data from our partner school districts? Is it for an external evaluation? Is it just to keep track of progress in the schools? I will say, data for data's sake doesn't do anybody any good. And asking for all of these data points, if we're going to do anything with them, then that's just asking, we're overburdening our partners. And so again, we want to make sure that data is used for action, right? And so why do we want the data for that? Then what type of data are we looking for? And so the data shared agreements that we have, lay out in detail the data that we're hoping to obtain from folks. And then very specifics, because for example, when we're talking about attendance, we'll say, okay, there was a push for one of our work groups that wanted attendance. We took that to Data Support Council, and they're like, what about attendance are you looking for? Do you just want a student who is counted for attendance, or do you want to be able to disaggregate the data of this student attended virtually, this student asynchronous virtual, synchronous virtual, or in person? And so then we're able to take that information and then ask it to our partners. What would be more helpful to you? They said, well, it would be great if we had all three. That way we could then filter and see how our young people are doing. Because one of the big things that we do annually is we do an education student success scorecard, where we get data from our community-based organizations, where we get young person's first name, last name, student ID, and then we match it with the data from our school districts. First, last, student ID. And so then, for example, Girls and Boys Club can then say, here is how our young people did compared to the students in X ISD. And then they can filter to find out how their young people in this other school district did compared to overall students in the school district. And that's going to be in areas of, again, grade, passing to the next grade, standardized exams, attendance, discipline, course taking, etc. And so they're able to then assess and then even see like, okay, how did our students who attended in at least 50% of our programming do compared to the students who only came to 1 week of programming. And so they're able to see, because then that's how they're going to be adjusting how they do some of the work. One of the other things is that whenever we're talking with our partners, we also share who's going to have access to the data. So here at Up Partnership, only the data team has access to it. And we get student level data. So that's that's the trust that we have established within the community, that they're able to give us that data. Because at the same time, we're kind of the only organization that has that other than the school districts. One of the other ways that we've, again, because the relationships are the work, is we have partnered with our county juvenile justice system. So for our justice involved young people group, we're able to get records from the schools on attendance and discipline. And then we're able to get information from our justice system through intakes that they've gotten. And so we're able to map then where our kids are. And so we're able to then find and let the school districts know, how are these kids doing, to make sure that once they've been, they may have been arrested, spent some time in county, did they re-enroll back into the school system? And how can we make sure to get them back into the school system so that we can kind of dismantle the school to prison pipeline and get them through the education system to graduate from high school. All of our data, because we deal with that student level, it's all goes through our secure FTP. And we're the only ones in the data team that has the access to it. I think also when we talk with them, we are very specific of, again, how we're going to use the data, when we will need it by, and then how we are going to ensure that they are getting what they need, because it can't be just us asking for the data. Again, what can we do to give back so that we can share and keep our students at the center, to get them to get them the supports that they need, be it through our community-based partners, through our higher eds, or through our K-12s. I do want to stress too, that as we're doing all of this work around it's using collaborative action, using our collective impact, is that whenever we're having conversations with these folks, we want to make sure that the conversations and the asks and everything happen in the meeting room, right? Happen when we're actually talking to each other, to have an open space of dialogue. What's working well, what's not? How can we adjust as needed? And have the conversations happen there as opposed to happening like in the parking lot, happening out there. Like, I wish they would do this, I wish they would do that. And having, so it's important for us to have this open space with our partners of constantly learning how we can improve, how we can use, how it's working for them. And then what are some ways that we can continue to work together to help our students. And, talking about just the MOU is just the beginning, because in the process then comes like now asking for the data, right? And receiving the data, cleaning the data, using the data. And that has led to, of course, lots of other additional steps that we need to be doing, because, for example, we can ask for the data and we'll get it from only a few partners. And so it's because, again, the ask may have been too strenuous for others because they just didn't have the time. And so then we can adjust, being like, okay, do folks for our networks really need it monthly, or is this more of a quarterly ask that we can do? And how are we going to make sure that we're again, serving their needs, but then also ensuring that we're taking their needs and the reality of how the data is going to be helpful. How it's going to be helpful to get to the long run to helping our students graduate from high school and get them to and through college. That is our big ask. And I mean, just recently we launched our Future Ready plan of saying that by 2030, 70% of our young people in Bexar County are going to be connected to a post-secondary degree or credential. At least 30% will be connected to career. Okay, that is a big jump. We're at 50% right now. And if we're saying we're going to be moving 20 percentage points in the next 8 years, that means everybody needs to be coming together. And so we're having those conversations with our different community partners and our different sectors to ensure that they are all collecting the data that's needed and then acting on the data to make those changes and acting quickly on it. So I will stop there, Tracy. I know that folks may have questions for the rest of the panelists as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Some really great points in there. I heard about, being clear about the data ask, the purpose, the content, the frequency are all really important things to consider when making that ask, and the importance too of that mutual benefit of engaging in those conversations. Thank you, Emily. So yeah, let's get to some questions now that have come up from our panelists here. One question is related to about reviewing the data, how and with whom decisions are made related to that data. So maybe would each of you like to take a minute and just share maybe some insight about maybe what the data is, if you didn't share that with us already, what data you're looking at, and maybe a few words about how you review that data and who's engaged with those decisions. We can just kind of go around the table, maybe starting with Yvette, and then Chris and Emily.
One of the major things we do with the information, with the data right now, is daily, actually, with our homeschool coordinator that is positioned in the school itself. She is actually able to pretty much look at each and every one of our students' grades, attendance. Because she's the homeschool coordinator, she pays attention to attendance, and she uses that to pretty much, she goes directly to the homes if they start showing a lot of truancy, and she's able to work with the parents and find out what the problem is and what they need, what can we do to help to get the student to school, and she also coordinates our in-house tutoring along, with looking at the grades and seeing who isn't caught up with certain projects or lessons, and especially our seniors, because they all have to have certain things completed and so many credits by the end of the year. So she'll partner up the students along with the tutors and whatever else help that they need to make sure that they're graduating and that they're up on their grades and attendance. So that's the major way that right now that we're using the data. And like I mentioned earlier, we are creating in-house for education, SCC Education Department, with a personalized database, and it's still in the works, but eventually we're going to be able to put in all the information that we can get, and that would be, of course, the grades, attendance, any type of suspensions and such. And we also have a teen workforce development person that works right directly with us, and they are able to find out what the students' strengths and weaknesses are, and we'll put those in our database also. And we have a sports person here that will help the students in any way to keep up their what do you call it? Well, to keep playing sports and somehow be involved, because we all know how important sports is for helping a student through school. And we also have our culture department that if we do have students here and we know that they're, I'm going to say I kind of flag them, and we know that they need a little extra help, a little bit more attention, a little bit more help with just life in general, just to help the kids in any sort of way. I feel as though we have to come at them, all around with our different programs and our different departments. And I'm starting also with what we get, and like I said, flagging the students, to be able to take those names and work with them with our Indian Child Welfare Department. And we make sure that, you know, the truancies go through them so that they can start working on helping the student in that way. So there's a lot of different ways of using the information that we're getting. And it's all for the good and the betterment of all of our students. And like I said, I look forward to moving on and getting this database a little bit more detailed. And that's kind of what we're working on our end right now. So looking forward to a lot of good things yet.
Thank you, Yvette. Chris, you had mentioned and talked a little about those conversations and organizing and interpreting the data. Can you tell us a little bit about that review of data, how and with whom that takes place?
I'd be happy to. We collect academic data for 9 through 12, and that includes a summary spreadsheet, and it has all of the students that are in that grade and their present standing. And it's the high school team. There's 4 individuals. There's 1 person assigned to the freshman class, 1 person to the sophomore, juniors, and seniors. So that team, including myself, review the status of where they're at the end of each trimester. And we just recently implemented taking a look at the progress report time, and we communicate the progress reports with our families, and then we communicate with our families in a very formal letter the end of the trimester standing also.
You're on mute, Tracy.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry, over to you, Emily. Yes, who's involved with that data and how does that take place?
Sure. So I guess it depends on the different projects. For example, one of the things with our Equitable Enrollment Collaborative, we actually got the program folks and the data folks in the same room. And as crazy as that sounds, that doesn't happen very often, because usually we have the program folks are, you know, so busy creating programs, working with the students, and then the data folks are a different space. And so we wanted to make sure to get them together, because then that way the questions could be asked of what is it exactly that you're trying to figure out? And so then we can talk, and then saying, so then I'm talking like within school district, those same people come into the same room. And so then that was great, because then they were able to talk about like, oh, that's what you're looking for. Okay, here's what this is. Here's what we can provide. And then from there, additional things we're able to develop. With the data, like I mentioned earlier, the Data Support Council is also super helpful in reviewing overall like the MOUs. And I just want to +1 what you were mentioning, Yvette, about creating like this big database of how things can work. That is my dream. So I mean, especially as we've got all these different partners, because we know that the young person's life does not, an educational career does not begin and end within 8 to 4 in the classroom walls. There's everything else that's going around this child. So how can we do some case management and strong case management to ensure that our young people are getting all the different resources that they need? And one of the ways that we were able to bring that together was right at the beginning of COVID. We had our school districts that found that they were like missing children. They were reaching out and they weren't being able, they weren't getting responses. And so then they said, what can we do here? So we reached out to our CBO partners and said, here are kids that we can't find, the districts can't find. And we were able to say, but through our records, we know that they're an active member of your organization. Can you reach out to them and ask them, do they have the food that they need? Do they need technology? Do they need anything with paying bills or anything like that? Because we have other resources that we can connect them to. And so that's just a beautiful way of being able to connect so that we can make sure that our young people are taken care of. And it's different ways of using the data to get to like a fantastic solution.
Thanks, Emily. I'm really intrigued too how you're working not only with your school districts, but there's other organizations, other community organizations or sources that also contribute to that data to provide a full picture. That's really interesting. Another question in the chat box, and we've got about 6 minutes left. So I want to give everyone a chance to respond to this. And I think, Chris, you had mentioned that with your data sharing, you include a waiver in your school application. And the question from our audience is, what methods do you use to get the attention of parents and students to participate? And I'm presuming not only participate in a program, but also participate in that data sharing and giving that permission.
We provide flyers. We market our programs and invite, excuse me, our families, and we make connection with them and let them know what our programs provide. And because we've been in place for several years, parents are much more familiar with what we do. But it's the marketing and our staff contacting their grade level that they're assigned to, their families and students, and encourage enrollment, that we have some resources that will help support them.
Thank you. Emily or Yvette or Larry, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Yvette did a nice job of explaining what we do. We look at attendance and behavioral data, co-curricular participation, special education numbers. And then we also look at the number of students that we have targeted for tier 2 and tier 3 interventions within our district to see, what that's saying. Is there a specific group? Is it male, female? Is it middle school, elementary? Where are we having these gaps in education? Where are kids missing out, and what we can do to kind of strengthen those areas, but also provide the intervention as early as possible, so that we don't have such a high number going into special education just because of achievement gap or what it may be. So I think that was echoed by some of the other panelists too.
And you did mention waivers, and Larry, I'm not quite sure, but I believe it's part of the enrollment process at the school, because I remember having to sign a paper for my son in the beginning, saying, you're given waivers for the homeschool coordinator, but they're also their direct job, because they're a part of the school system themselves. That's why they're able to receive the data daily. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our homeschool coordinators go and try to get all Native American parents to sign the release of information records so that they have access to that. Some don't, and that's okay. That's their choice. But we found that the majority do, and that really helps us kind of track our data and keep tabs on kids who may need that extra help or attention or tutoring once they get into middle school and high school, or receive the tier 2 and 3 intervention in elementary school.
Thank you. And which is the smidget of time we have left, Emily, I did want to give you a chance to respond to that as well. Many of our grantees have to get permission of the specific families and parents to engage in that data sharing. Is that something that you also have to do with your districts?
With our school districts, we don't, because again, the school district attorneys have said that we have a legitimate educational interest in the educational records. So that is allowable under FERPA. However, when we work with our young people, specifically as we're bringing in young, the voice aspect of it, we want to make sure to talk to our young people, be like, what are we missing? And so that they can inform that. But we have not, because again, we are not direct.
Thank you. Thank you. A little bit of different context, but a couple of different approaches that we got to hear from today from all of our panelists. And I know we have just a minute left of our time together. So I do want to point out to all of our participants that every session you attend today will have a final poll, which is rate this session. If you click on that little poll tab in the Pathable platform, you'll see that. So please give us your stars. We want your feedback, and then in the last minute or two that I have left, I will just highlight some of those resources. All of the ones that you see on the screen right now are available in that Files tab, as well as in the resource library after our session today. You can find them there as well. But several of these are set up like guidebooks or workbooks and have some really nice tips, not only for you, but also possibly for the LEAs that you may be working with. The Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction resource also has some examples and lays out some common provisions that are put in those agreements. Data is a piece of that, but there's other provisions that they've worked with as well across some broader issues. But I want to thank all of our panelists for contributing today, for taking the time from the day to join us and share their insights and stories. You can always connect with these folks too in the conversations tab. If you want to follow up and have a question or message them directly, feel free to do that. We have their contact information on the screen as well. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope you have a great conference, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for having us. Have a good day.